like mine. Trying to get it out of my head.
All right, it is 5:45 and we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight for our special board meeting of September 23rd, 2024. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here. Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Dahlke.
Here.
Amber Kirsting.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf.
Here. We have a quorum. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our mission statement. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Do we have any proposed changes to the agenda order tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to community communications. We have 3 speakers. First up is Josie Pillman.
Hi, my name is Josie Pillman and I live in Knapp, which is a part of the Menomonie School District. Dr. Zadowski, Madam Chairman, and members of the board. Recently I went to check out the Knapp Elementary School library books and bulletin boards. What was I looking for? Anything blatant or subtle that was proclaiming LGBTQ+ sexual perversions as truth or something to celebrate. I found a few rainbows without a Noah's Ark underneath them and a bulletin board saying, "Believe in your shelf," with the shelf in rainbow colors. Should I be concerned? Next, I found 5 early reading board books. 1, Love Makes a Family. 2, It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. These 2 I have tried to remove and they are intentionally still there. 3, Rainbow Revolutionaries, 50 LGBTQ+ people who made history. 4, ABC of gender identity, helping kids and ourselves embrace our differences. 5, What's Gender Identity? School Board, these books have been specifically chosen and sheltered by the trained professional educators. The educators have come through an immoral system that turns morality on its head and sears the conscience. They no longer know right from wrong. Furthermore, they are bent on teaching our young children that wrong is right. New definitions are brought in to confuse the child's mind. Who ever heard of sexual identity? You were born a boy or a girl, and no teacher or book should tell you anything different. Little children are made to trust the adults in their lives. They believe you. Stop indoctrinating our little children with lies. I would guess that some of our staff know right from wrong, but they are intimidated to follow the program. How does this relate to tonight's agenda? Take a look at Title IX and the Biden administration's new definition of it. Now, educators are told they must let boys into girls' sports, locker rooms, and bathrooms under the threat of withholding federal funding if you don't. But no worries, here in the SDMA, our gender policy plan already supports this immorality. After the first reading at the September 9th board meeting, members gave unanimous support for our immoral gender plan. School Board, I dare you to do the right thing and vote no tonight after the second reading. You have another chance. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Hey Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, and I'm not going to hold you to the answer. If you had to guess how many books are available to students at Knapp Elementary, just total ballpark. Hundreds, thousands? Thousands of books. Okay, thank you.
Our second speaker tonight is Joyce Wheeler.
Joyce Wheeler, Menomonie. Tonight, I expect that this SDMA school board will unanimously rubber stamp the approval of Title IX changes, as you have been told is required by the Biden administration. By changing the definition of sex in the SDMA from objective to subjective, from biology to feelings, you will be codifying the rejection of science in the district. The basics of reproduction have been accepted by most of humanity since its beginning. We see and understand Biology 101 as we watch the animals on the farm, our pets, the Japanese beetles on the grapevines all summer. Unfortunately, the Menomonie School District already has many of these Title IX gender policies in place. For example, people with penises can play on girls' sports teams and be housed overnight in hotel rooms with their female teammates. Presumably, if an adult teacher or chaperone with a penis identified as a woman, they could also be housed in a hotel room with minor female students on school trips. Presumably, it would be against the new rules to tell any of the parents because that would be discrimination or harassment. It seems these rapid changes would only compel speech and add a more formalized structure for punishing students and others who speak out against these frightening and experimental policies. My understanding is that the federal requirement to change this long-standing anti-discrimination rule to include gender identification on the same basis as sex has been stopped or at least put on lengthy hold in the courts. This means there is no requirement upon the SDMA to implement these changes at this time. It should also be clear that there's no societal consensus on this issue. In the last few months, most area school districts have voted no or tabled these changes. Specifically, the districts of Baldwin, Woodville, Hudson, Osceola, Somerset, St. Croix Central, River Falls, Glenwood City, Spring Valley, Clear Lake, Colfax, Elkmount, Frederick, Luck, New Richmond, and even the universities of Wisconsin. None of these school districts feel that the law compels them to do this now. Any statement to the contrary should be viewed with grave suspicion. In the SDMA, science was nice while it lasted. Thank you.
And our third speaker tonight is Mike Cooper.
Good evening. Mike Cooper, Menomonie, Wisconsin. I don't have a really well-prepared notes tonight because you know how life is sometimes. Anyway, you're here to approve Title IX. And I know you're under the pressure because the fiddler, the man who pays the fiddler calls the tunes. We got the federal government's going to come in and they're not going to give you some bucks that you don't kowtow. Is that your job? If you remember, those who were here last fall, I mentioned a book called Magdeburg Confession, which talks about your job as a magistrate, a lesser magistrate. And even though there are magistrates above you telling you what to do, your job is also to protect those below you. That's your responsibility. You are to protect those below you from bad government, bad people, bad jobs. And Title IX is bad. Now, you can either step up to the plate and do what's best for the students or take the money. That's up to you. Thank you.
All right, up next we have the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So, okay.
Second Hines.
Great. Tonight we have only the certification of the Menomonie Middle School safety drill and the certification of the Knapp Elementary safety drill. Any questions or discussion about these safety drill certifications? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
Yes.
Great. Motion passes unanimously. We have no content in the personnel consent agenda this evening. So on to the action agenda. First, we have an action to approve revisions to policy 164, which is board member compensation and expenses. I'll entertain a motion to approve the changes.
So moved, Abe?
Second.
Motion by Abe, second by Dominique. Discussion on this. I assume we're looking at the same thing that we had first reading of last time?
Yes, there's been no changes, and this is just to align the school board policy with what the electors approved at this year's annual meeting.
Any questions or discussion on those changes? Pretty straightforward.
And just a reminder, if anyone is interested in not accepting the salary of $1,000 or $1,200, there's a form to fill out to reject it so that it doesn't go through the tax paperwork. So.
All right. If there's no other questions or discussion, let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. Next, we have action to approve revisions to policy 113, our non-discrimination in district programs, activities, and operations. Entertain a motion to approve.
Amy, so moved. Second.
Motion by Amy, second by Angie. Any discussion on this policy? This was reviewed at a meeting 2 weeks ago. As discussed at this meeting, the changes we're looking at tonight are mostly, would you say, bureaucratic in nature. They don't change a lot of the operations as they've been currently happening.
Rachel, I guess I would just like to add, and I appreciate the comments we heard tonight. I know that this is an issue that's received a lot of attention, not only across the country, but regionally as well. And, Mrs. Euler had emailed me last week, and I appreciated that communication as well. And just a couple things I wanted to point out. First of all, Title IX is not bad. It's been very important for opportunities for the girls in our school and across the nation. Really the big question has to do with what was talked about tonight with including gender identity. And what I can tell you is that practices have already been in place, not only in our school district, but across the state. The WIAA, the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, already has a policy that's been in place for years now, and it provides guidelines in terms of what a student would need to do in order to compete in a sport that would be different than their biological sex. And it really is quite rigorous in terms of the different steps that a student would take, and really it's kind of over a year-long process. It's not just a snap decision that people make when this stuff happens. And I also appreciated the comment about other schools potentially tabling this action, leading on this action. And I will say that I know that is happening in some schools, but just because the board may decide to table action on a policy does not mean that the district is going to not take action in alignment with current law. And in our legal district, the jurisdiction of our district, the Whitaker case out of Kenosha really is the prevailing case that schools need to pay attention to in Wisconsin. And in that situation, there was a settlement of about $1 million over a bathroom situation. So this isn't as simple as what we heard tonight in some of the public comments. This isn't as simple as telling the federal government that we don't want the federal money that is available for our school district, there's also a huge legal exposure. Now, I don't think that this is done in the courts. I do think that there's going to be additional legal analysis. I think there's going to be additional legal challenges. Ultimately, this probably will end up at the Supreme Court at some point. I don't want to necessarily go to the Supreme Court, and I don't think many schools in Wisconsin would be in that situation either. So I do appreciate the concerns. I do know that this is not an easy issue, but I think based on what we've heard from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, based on what we've heard from other school attorneys, based on the guidance we've received, I think that this really is in the best interest of the school district to approve these policies tonight.
Any other questions or discussion on the policy change? Seeing none, let's vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right, second item on our action agenda, is revisions to policy, we're just gonna start over. Changes to policy exhibit 113, and so this is the public display, public exhibit of non-discrimination. Same changes, or same concept as the last policy, but this is the display version. Entertain a motion to approve the changes to Exhibit 113.
Hines moves.
Second.
All right, motion by Emily, second by Michelle. Questions or discussion on this item?
The little box at the top that says for approval, that's not going to be on.
Correct, that'll be removed.
If there's no other questions or discussion, let's vote on this one. And motion passes unanimously. All right, on to our discussion agenda. First up, we have the District 2025 Health Insurance Renewal.
So the board has reviewed the health insurance renewal timeline in the past meetings. And today's update is to let you know that we did have a meeting of the Health Medical Committee last week. Rachel was in attendance representing the board. And it was a very good meeting in terms of discussing with our new consultant from the insurance center things that we can do to get better value out of the investment that we have with our current health insurance program. I was very pleased to hear from our consultant the importance of maintaining choice for our employees, also maintaining familiarity with our employees. And I was very excited to hear about some of the design options that have been used locally, Dunn County, the city of Menomonie, and really the biggest difference from what we're looking at now compared to what our current plan is would be to incentivize employees to receive care for certain procedures in places where that care has been negotiated to be high value, very, very good care at a lower price based on negotiated contracts. And I was trying to think of an analogy that would be understandable. And well, I really enjoy taking my vehicle to the car dealership because I am the least handy person when it comes to vehicles. I just take it to the car dealership and, whether it be brakes or oil change or what was the last thing? Struts, that's what they call them, right? It just takes to the dealership, and that's kind of what our insurance plan is right now. It's kind of like we just take everything to the dealership. And what the insurance center has and what's been used with the Dunn County employees is not only having the dealership as a very good option where you know you're going to get great service, but also you have these negotiated contracts where perhaps a certain place specializes in brakes or knee replacements, or another place specializes in tires, or maybe it's MRIs. Or we could go down the list, exhaust systems and colonoscopies. This is the best way that I can understand it. And what I can tell you is, and you look at the numbers, and it really is pretty staggering. And also, you know, one thing we have with our current plan is it really is a directed plan to be in network. You're working through the Mayo system, which has served us very well. But that's actually been somewhat of not a criticism, but a concern with some people who, you know, would maybe want to go to like an Oak Leaf or some other place to get some service done. And I think that through this incentive program that the insurance center is developing, you know, it actually will provide our employees with more choice and more ownership of the medical care that they'll be able to receive. And like I mentioned, with these negotiated discounts, that allows for enough savings to not only provide employees an incentive, but it also can have a significant impact on the bottom line for our health insurance budget. So there are a lot of moving pieces to it. We were hoping to have, you know, kind of the plan design ready for you to review in detail tonight. It's just not done yet. So we have added another meeting of the Health Insurance Committee, and I know Jenny added that, and Rachel, I appreciated the suggestion. When we get to the end of the meeting and we list the dates of upcoming committee meetings, October 7th, there'll be another meeting, it's October 8th, there'll be another meeting of the Health Medical Committee, and then on October 14th, we plan to have that ready for the board to take a look at. So we will share the information with the board well before that, so you have an opportunity to review it and certainly call and ask questions. But Sam has been very involved, Eric and Leah have been very involved, and our Health Medical Committee. We also will be sharing this information with our entire staff and the QIC group, so we'll have a lot of opportunity for feedback in early October. But are there any questions that the board members have about the health insurance renewal?
Yes, I'm sure this sort of question will be raised by the committee, but you know, I want to be sure that the sort of, you know, preferred negotiated providers are either within a certain distance of miles or have a certain number of facilities available, so they're not kind of, you know, encouraging, or not, let's say, putting undue stress on people by looking at, you know, hundreds of mile radius to get care, since we know we have limited providers in this area.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing I want to re-emphasize, if I didn't say it clearly enough, we're not looking to go away with our current primary care options. This would be more of an additional menu. I will say that, you know, depending on the types of incentives you would like to receive, that there could be some travel involved that would be, you know, more than, you know, driving to Eau Claire. Although some of the incentives you might be able to get to Eau Claire, like the MRI example. But I think there's also the option for the employee center. They can kind of set their own parameters, you know, in terms of, you know, how far they'd be willing to travel, and then they can see which incentives are available based on that radius.
I'll say all of the examples, like of those negotiated rates and the referral locations that the consultant gave during the meeting were basically in the Chippewa Valley, or maybe Baldwin, you know, or like,
or towards the Twin Cities.
yeah. So they were, I mean, it was pretty focused on like Oak Leaf, Mayo, places in Eau Claire. That's kind of area. Those were the ones he mentioned. And the insurance center is maybe not based in, but has an office in Eau Claire, so they really are working pretty locally. So I don't expect that to be a huge problem.
Also, there are some changes too, because In the last couple of years, we've lost our internal internal medicine doctors in Menomonie. They're all in Eau Claire. And also childbirthing, labor and delivery, all that's moved to Eau Claire. So sometimes there's no choice but to have to travel at least a little ways. And I know there's many of us who have had issues where they had to go to Rochester if they're on the natal plan.
One thing I heard for the first time at that meeting from the consultant, and I was just floored by, he said the Chippewa Valley area is the second highest cost of healthcare region. Second in the entire country, the second region for highest healthcare costs, which just really floored me to learn. Yeah. And that's also, that's what's really been driving the escalating costs for SDMA's insurance plan.
I'm on the health committee that I couldn't make that meeting, so I appreciate Rachel for you stepping in and representing us. Thank you.
Do folks have other questions or discussion? And if things, I guess I would also say to board members, if things come to you before October 8th, to send them to Dale or Joe or myself to, if there are questions that you'd like to have asked in that meeting with the consultant or before then. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to final budget revisions for the 2023-24 year.
So Eric and Leah worked together on this quite a bit, and certainly, we'll be able to take additional questions back. But Eric, is there anything that you wanted to say about the final budget adjustments? I know you weren't here to run this budget, but I know you worked with Leah in the preparation.
Yeah, just a clarification on some things like and I'm assuming you can see these revisions correct. So the 59,000 was a reclassification. It was originally classified as a fee, like a per page fee related to the copier. The auditors wanted that to be placed under an equipment lease, and so that was the reason for that one.
And that's the fourth one down there?
Yeah, that's the 59,712.
Okay.
The one underneath that is fund transfers, not only for the grants, but also Fund 46 and Fund 50. Below that, you see the grant changes or revisions for that. The Fund 46 transfer was the 3.4 million that was placed in that fund. And then the Fund 50 food service, that is for unused allocation for student lunches, unpaid student lunches, or bad student lunch debt. And so that was reallocated.
So again, this is standard procedure for the board. Once the audit goes through, and like Eric mentioned, there's always a few items that the auditors would like us to move and reflect different things in different accounts. And so that's kind of what this has to do with. And unless there's any other questions, we'll bring this back for board consideration at the next meeting.
Joe, can you just very briefly describe, Joe and Eric both briefly describe, I want to make sure I understand the Fund 27 transfer and the Fund 10 transfer and how those kind of wrap into the Fund 46. Just so I understand how the Fund 27 amount, how to read that number, because the Fund 27 is a revenue subtraction. The fund transfer is a expense increase. So I just want to be sure I'm reading it correctly. If you could just describe those 3 lines.
I think if that's okay with you, we'll have a good answer for you on that before you guys vote on it.
That's fine, yeah.
I want to make sure we
Yep.
give you the exact definition on all of that.
And can you include more words than what Dave said to help the rest of us who need more words to understand what you just said? That'd be great.
Maybe to explain my train of thought, I was looking through this and of course looking for the big numbers, and of course you see the Fund 46 transfer and trying to understand, okay, that was clearly an adjustment that happened kind of in the last month of the fiscal year. And the question I was trying to figure out is, okay, where did that money kind of, move from, right, to Fund 46? We know it's typically a Fund 10 to Fund 46 transfer at the end of the year, that's my understanding. But looking at the numbers, looked to me like it was broken between kind of the Fund 10, Fund 27. I just want to make sure, just for my own awareness and understanding and literacy, I guess, just making sure I understand like how that money flowed to Fund 46, just so I understand the budgeting of the fund.
Sure, no problem. We'll actually put it together in a separate description for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion about the budget revisions? And these will come back to us at the next meeting for a vote. All right, seeing none, you're off the hook for your first. All right. Review updated actuarial study of district post-employment trust.
So you can see the updated study, and this is informational, and there's a lot of information involved. And actually, what we started doing several years ago is we asked for an executive summary, and that's where that first attachment is. You can read through the whole study as well. But the key takeaways are this, is that our district is in a good place in terms of our post-employment benefits. We do still have a liability, and that liability continues to fluctuate based on a number of things. Probably the largest fluctuation has to do with how the changes in the cost of healthcare happen. But the other piece is that we're very well funded, and that's the good news. And because we're fully funded, we actually could have some options in the future in terms of how those funds are used. So there's still a number of years that we still are going to have a liability, so it's not like we can just cancel this trust. At the same time, the fact that we're fully funded is a really good situation to be in. Are there any questions about this study that you'd like us to get back to you on?
I'm just curious, we have not, this isn't like an annual report we get, is that correct? So this was a one-time study,
It's-
or is there a kind of a recurring schedule for this?
So I believe the rule is that you have to have it updated every 2 years.
Okay.
And then the year in between, they just do a table update. Because the study is what controls whether or not you can contribute to the trust and whether or not those contributions would be considered to be a shared expense.
No?
So this is the more comprehensive review. And if you go back into board docs, you can see how it's changed. And actually the study itself here kind of shows a 3-year look back at how the trust has changed. But you can go back years and years if you'd like to look at it and to see more history on it.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't go back and get- I was just curious because I did not remember this coming up a year ago.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is when I came here 11 years ago, I was very, very concerned because we had about a $30 million unfunded liability. And there was a lot of work done and a lot of difficult decisions made with the school board, with the staff. And it's a combination of prioritizing funding our trust and changing our benefit design from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. And it was very difficult, but 11 years later, we're now seeing the positive impact, financial positive impact that has had on our district's budget. Without the changes, we would not be in the situation of not having a $30 million unfunded liability.
Any other questions or discussion about the actual actuarial study? All right, seeing none. We will move on to strategic planning for the school district. So our current strategic plan is officially 2018 to 2024. So we are due for a new strategic planning process. We have before us some good summary and some questions, and then also summary of the actions that were taken in 2018, 2019. Do you want to lead us off with any of this?
Sure, I guess a couple things to point out. First of all, there's no mandate that a school district have a strategic plan. I definitely think it's best practice, and I'm not trying to persuade the board not to have one. I really think it's important that we have a strategic plan, but I want you to know there's no legal mandate. It's really at the board's pleasure what the board would like to do in terms of strategic planning. Secondly, I'd like to point out that we had a very good process 5 years ago, but you can see that that process actually was about a 2-year process if you really look at the very beginning of it. And I do think it's important that we get started, not that this has to take us 2 years again. However, depending on the board's intentions and how the board would like this built, it could take quite some time, and it will have an expense. We could do it internally. I think there's a lot of knowledge of strategic planning on our team, but there's also really good research about the value of using a consultant or a third party to help facilitate that process, and that's something I would certainly recommend. But a few of the key questions that I had for the board, what would be the primary goals and objectives that you hope to accomplish with this? Do you want to start from scratch? I mean, you can hire someone to come in and totally start from the mission and vision and overarching goals of the district. At the last time we went through this, it was unanimous that we had a good mission and vision and the general pillars of the plan. So really we approached it more as a refresh, but it doesn't have to be that way. We could start from scratch. And then lastly, I guess just any other feedback that board members might have in terms of what you'd like to see out of this plan, because what you want delivered will have a big impact on the planning on the front end.
So to answer, my answer to some of those questions is I actually think that the pillar system works pretty well. I think it's a good way to lay out things. When I think about the main way the pillars affect our work as a board is we work out the annual work plan, and it seems to me that like the items that we think are important in the work plan fit naturally into the pillars. And that means it's a good organizational system. Like it's a good way of labeling what the overall categories are of work, right? So as an organizational principle, I think actually the pillars, as they're currently labeled, I don't see any reason to tear them down and build new ones. It makes sense as a system. I think it's more about making sure the focus of those pillars and how to interpret them, and if there's things that the community values more or less than it did 5 years ago or 6 years ago, kind of refreshing that contact with what community goals are. I mean, obviously, over the timeline of the last strategic plan, the entire world changed, in several ways, and I know also we've been looking at it in terms of the budget. We've been looking a lot in terms of enrollment, and those are things that I think the board, like the district as a whole, would be much better prepared to address those challenges of maybe decreasing enrollment in some schools, maybe increasing enrollment in other schools, what the budget might look like, what people might want to budget for as citizens, as taxpayers. I think all those things would be informed by going through that kind of public, the public and employee side of that strategic planning process. I don't think we need to start from scratch.
I agree. I don't think we should start from scratch. I think a refresh is all we need, like the pillars. I do think we need to make sure we include, invite, encourage the community to have a lot of input, and then I'm not sure about an outside facilitator. I've worked in situations similar to this, both with and without kind of neutral on that point.
I know it takes a lot of work, but I really value the community. I think that helps them have some ownership over what they do. And of course, we talk about transparency and communication. I think that helps tremendously with, you know, the support that we're going to get from our community and our families on that. I can't remember how much it cost for our last consultant, you know, but that would be something to be considering. I think it's kind of nice when somebody from the outside comes in, because people might be more prone to, you know, say what they really feel or mean or want to say. But I also know that, you know, with their tight budget, I'm not sure that that would be to do, that would be okay to do, you know, based on that.
I think it'd be really interesting to maybe start some conversations with a consultant. Either it looks like Studer was used before, and I know there's others that the district has worked with, and kind of find out sort of what cost would be, and if there's a you know, a light version. I think about when I looked through the action plan from the last round, there's a lot here, and like you said, it was a 2-year process, and it does feel in some ways as if, you know, as you said, what we're looking for is a refresh rather than a total shakeup. And I do think there's a lot of value in bringing in a facilitator to make sure that we have the, you know, having somebody who can figure out how we're getting all of the stakeholders involved and how we are having, you know, having a constructive community conversations, but then also like figuring out the takeaways from that. I think I've been in situations, like I said, that where a skilled facilitator really can do some magic there. I would value that, but it'd be interesting to hear what some of these firms or consultants or individuals would have to offer in terms of maybe a version that isn't like writing a whole new plan from scratch.
I agree that we should just be refreshing the pillars. And from a different aspect, I just, or vantage point, I'm thinking there's a familiarity and a comfort with what that looks like. And it's referenced constantly. So that it's a living, breathing, working document. So it's often discussed where something falls that we happen to be doing across the pillars. Where is it in the pillars? And so I would like to see that stay in place and then just refresh it so it's current for our purposes. I'm curious to know, I was part of one of the teams back then, but I'm curious to know if there were obstacles or certain roadblocks or anything that like stands out in your memory. And I think Brian was maybe a part of it back then too. I'm not sure.
I think, to answer your question, Michelle, I think one of the big challenges is to try to get a wide voice. I think it's very easy to get into an echo chamber situation, especially if we only use in-person meetings. And what we tried to do last time to assist with that was the use of an electronic survey. And someone said something about like using a consultant light type of program. I would say that's kind of what we did with Studer. You know, Studer has some very comprehensive, not only planning but also management systems. And we really only contracted for the build of the strategic plan. And I don't think it's a good idea to use like a Google form or like a Google survey. I think we would want to partner with a third party, if nothing else, for the tool. And you know, Studer had a pretty good tool. You know, even school perceptions, you know, we've used them for a number of different things. Even if we didn't feel like we really needed the consultant in terms of, you know, helping work with the steering committee to take that data and prioritize it, put it in buckets. that might be something the board would want to take on, or maybe a steering committee of the board and some key community stakeholders. But what we also don't want is we don't want people to feel like the plan is, Rachel Henderson's plan or Joe Zadowski's plan or Abe Smith's plan or whoever. We really want it to be the school district's plan. And sometimes, and I know the board is working very well right now, but sometimes I think people feel maybe isolated if there isn't a third party. So I agree with your comments and what the other board members said. I mean, the pillars are really solid. They're, career, college, and life-ready graduates is pillar 1, student social and emotional wellness, pillar 2, our talented workforce, pillar 3, parent community partnerships, pillar 4, facilities and operations, pillar 5. And then under each pillar, there's a commitment. And I still think those commitments are good, and I'm not going to read through them. But really what needs to be refreshed are the deliverables. So we have our pillars, our commitments, and the deliverables. And based on those 5-year deliverables, that's kind of the target. And then once we have the deliverables, then it's really up to the administrative team working with the staff to create action plans that the board would monitor and hold everyone accountable for, have action plans to achieve those deliverables. And so to answer your question, Michelle, the challenge, I think, is to try to get a well-rounded, wide viewpoint of what our community wants. And with how busy people are, I think if we don't do something that goes beyond some in-person meetings, I think we'll be leaving out a large portion of our community.
On the outside facilitator already also, when there are in-person meetings, I think it's going to be important to, we're a small town, and almost everyone who would be interested in being involved has either past, relationships or conflicts with everyone else in the room, right? So I think there is actually a big advantage, especially if there's like small group environments where having a professional facilitator can be extremely useful simply to mediate, 30 years of history between individuals who you can get them to agree in the right tone, but you don't want it to become, a debate.
I was involved in the last one, obviously, and one of the things was the board members would go to these meetings where the facilitator was, and then we would, like you say, try to facilitate the issues and, and whatever and so forth. And I can tell you that not every one of them, but there were a few where it would get a little bit contentious because it would be people who were talking about things that they didn't like or they wanted to change. They could get a little contentious, so you had to have somebody there to kind of say, we hear you, but, and whatever, that kind of thing, but we have to kind of move to more of a positive if at all possible. I mean, it's important to hear those things, but, you don't want somebody just blaming the facilitator for everything because they're not even, they're just coming in to help out.
And to Amy's point, it can be very difficult to make a determination between loudness and volume, and I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but there were some people disappointed in the last process because they felt very passionately about some items, but some of those items that they really were fairly isolated in terms of not, I can't remember the term the facilitator used, but really not meeting muster of something that was, at the level of the cross-section being identified by a large number of people in the community. So certainly passion, comes into play, but I think when we're doing this, we're trying to, think about, the masses, the big part of our community, what's going to be accepted widely or desired widely.
I also lean towards the idea of having a facilitator or third party. Just one for just sheer workload, like even though we don't want to start from scratch, we're still asking, like we have a big ask if we're putting together a new thing. So I think it makes sense to have someone who's helping push that along so it doesn't just fall on our staff. And then also like that can help all the moving parts stay focused.
How about a timeline? like the start of next school year, would that be appropriate? Or did the board have a different timeline that you may be thinking
The
about?
start of next school year for what?
The timeline for having the strategic plan, the new plan completed.
Okay.
That seems like a realistic goal. I guess before, to me, the first question, or maybe that should be the first question, is what's the timeline of the, for, you know, what's the timeline for completion? I'm also, no, I guess I shouldn't derail that, but I am also curious about the process for getting started. The action plan we have from 2018 references a steering committee. And I don't know when, you know, at what point we would want to consider creating a steering committee, and also if, you know, by what process.
I think some of that would come down to the consultant that is selected. You know, and it depends on how involved the board wants to get. I think in the last one, the board appointed 3 board members to help advise, you know, the early part of the process. And then really the steering committee was more checking in, you know, I think there might have been 2 or 3 meetings scheduled where the information, that the consultant would present the information, and like Amy mentioned, getting into some small groups and try to really put the information in buckets and prioritize the information. Those were the main charges of the steering committee. Our work plan for this year says that we'll work with the board to determine a process and develop a strategic plan for 2025 and 2030, and have a timeline ready for the board to consider by January 1st. So it's not saying the plan has to be done by January 1st, but at least have our plan for the plan done by January 1st.
I think the first step would be to look at consultants and just find out what they charge, and then aggregate that information, you know, what they can do for what, you know, for what the cost, and then go from there, and then see what they decide about whether they think they need a steering committee to help them, or to be with them, or meet with them, or whatever. And then once you got that step established, then you could start the process of, you know, making a survey or whatever the steering committee or board decides.
So would the board as a whole want to be interviewing consultants, or would you like to delegate that to administration, or appoint some members of the board to represent the board? Because I'm thinking, you know, probably going to end up looking at somewhere between 2 and 5 consultants to see what options might fit our needs.
I get kind of excited about that, and I would really like to be part of it.
Do you want to be appointed?
I have joy seeing how much joy you have. I think it would be great to have a board member support, or are you thinking like having like a committee of board people do it? I mean, I'm happy to appoint you.
I'm pretty comfortable delegating most of the work to admin with a board member sitting in on the process. Is that kind of what you're thinking about? Does that make sense?
Anybody else?
Did you have thoughts, Sam?
I think last time there were 3 board members, not that there has to be 3, there were 3 people that were, you know, and that was a different board too, where I think the intent was to try to have kind of some different representation from different parts of the board. I'm comfortable with 1 unless there's more that want to be involved.
I think that's a good way to look at it. 1, 2, 3, depending on who wants to get involved. And I think it would be good to have a on that date, like your original question. Well, you know, when should we have this delivered? Maybe the facilitator would help determine that. And I also want to, I said I was kind of neutral about that outside. Especially that neutrality, non-biased position would be important.
On the timeline question, I feel like it should definitely take less than a year and whether that's, you know, end of next school year, or that ends up being next January, you know, 26 or December 25 or whatever, but more than a year seems ridiculous to me. So I think the process should be contained within one, 12-month cycle, whatever it might be. From, once the contract is signed with the consultant, it should be, moved right along.
I think we can get it done before the start of next school year.
I would like to see that by next school year, definitely. Problem is, there's a summer in there, so sometimes that gets in the way. But, if we have it by January 1st, our idea, then hopefully we can spend next spring getting organized so that we can just break it out when we need to and get it done.
I also think as a practical matter, like having it start with the beginning of the school year just makes a lot more sense than rolling out a strategic plan in January.
I don't think we have to decide this now. If the board decides that they want multiple people, I'd be happy to help. But I also don't think do that. That's a decision I don't think we have to make right now.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if it's the kind of thing that, like, board members could be invited to meetings, and if people are able to show up and have interest, they could, but,
Yeah, we certainly, what I see happening is doing some research on consultants. Depending on that research, we may want to wait till after the WASB convention, because there will be consultants at the convention, at the exhibit hall, and giving presentations. And perhaps immediately following the WASB convention, myself, Amber, and whoever else wants to get involved could develop a short list and then do some interviews and hopefully get someone on board, end of February at the most, to get going on the next spring.
is that a situation where prior to the convention, we could compile some information about cost and availability and things like that? Like, kind of knowing, so when the student could start February 1st, the cost is this, so blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we could. If we don't want to use the convention as a fact-finding mission, I can rattle off 5 of them right now, and we could get proposals from them right now, and then you're thinking maybe try to check them out at the convention?
Yeah, I guess I could see the convention as being a great fact-finding opportunity to kind of feel them out in terms
Sure.
of like value residents, or just sort of like, I don't know, what kind of the vibe. But in advance of that, we could have some of the more basic data.
Okay, so we'll get proposals ahead of the convention.
Does that make sense? I don't want to make it hard.
That's
for
fine.
you.
Yes, I think that's good, because then when we go to the convention, we can all take our turn and figure out where we want to go, so that everybody gets a chance to see them and bring that to the table. Also, I like the idea that Amber wants to serve. I think that's a really good thing. Also, I would expect because of that, then we would also have a report each board meeting to find out where we're at in the process from the two of you.
If there's activity, yes.
Yeah.
Do we want to appoint Amber as something? As a liaison to the process of identifying a facilitator?
I appoint Amber for the facilitator.
Do we need a motion? We don't need really a motion.
A motion?
Are there any objections to appointing Amber?
There you go.
Very great.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering, and I'm glad you're really excited about it.
Good.
All right, if there's no further discussion on strategic planning, we have extracurricular staff contract requests.
You can see there's several listed in your informational packet tonight. It mostly has to do with all the different fall activities, sports, the play. I think that's pretty much it. But we appreciate all of the people who are working with our students with the various sports and activities this fall.
Any questions or discussions about those contract requests? Seeing none, we have items related to our next meeting dates and board committees and reports. So the QIC will have its first meeting of the year, October 7th at 3:50 As was mentioned earlier, on October 8th, the Health and Medical Committee will be meeting to review those proposals. Folks who are on those committees, if you're unable to attend, please let us know as soon as possible. No school October 11th, Professional Development Day October 14th, our regular school board meeting October 14th, the Health and Medical Committee will be meeting again October 17th, and then October 23rd is the WASB Regional Meeting at the Off-Broadway Banquet Center. Hopefully, if folks are interested in attending that, you have already let Jenny know. But if you haven't, I think today is our deadline. So before you leave here, let Jenny know if you'd like to attend that and/or the WASB convention in January. Any questions, comments, discussion?
One thing I wanted to pose to, so over early part of the summer, we had the kind of community listening sessions, outreach. That's not quite the same strategic planning in a sense, but it's a good way to collect information. We talked about, we took kind of a break in August, September, because it was, we were all at our wits' end in various ways. I'd be curious if that's something, we don't have to answer this now, but I'd like board members to think about if that's something you want to restart on that side, or will, and just ask that question to yourself, and we can talk about it at some point in the future.
If we are on the subject of asking questions of ourselves, one thing that makes me think of, and also the discussion about strategic planning, earlier in the summer we had discussed the possibility of a board retreat. We had decided not to pursue it at the time. And again, a question to ask ourselves is, as we think about things like resuming this community outreach or the strategic planning process, if we would find value in scheduling a board retreat. And if you have thoughts about that you want to share with me or with Joe offline, otherwise I might suggest putting it on the agenda at an upcoming meeting. Any other questions or discussion related to items related to next meeting dates? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.